So welcome, we're glad you're here. Let us start. God is a God of movement. Jesus was a refugee and a migrant. And Christianity itself is a religion that is always on the move. From the very beginning, God is not static, God moves. In Genesis, God calls Abram to leave his land, his kin, and his father's house. And God's promise unfolds through Abram's displacements. The story begins not with arrival, but with a departure. The Exodus, arguably the central story of Israel's faith, is not about a people staying put. It is about an enslaved people on the move, fleeing violence, crossing borders, carried by a God who always goes ahead of them. Israel does not meet God in a palace. They meet God on the road, in the wilderness, while staying in tents. And that pattern doesn't end there. The prophets constantly remind Israel, remember who you were. Remember that you were once strangers. Remember that you lived at the mercy of others. Remember that your God is one who hears the cry of the displaced people. And then, in the fullness of time, God did something even more radical. God moved into the neighborhood. And we celebrate that feast this week, Christmas. Jesus is born not in a place of safety, but in a precarious situation. Almost immediately, his family flees state-sponsored violence. They cross a border to survive. The Holy Family becomes refugees in Egypt, ironically seeking shelter in the very place that once enslaved their forebears. And Jesus never really settles down after that. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, he says. His ministry unfolds on dusty roads, in borrowed boats, at dinner tables, where I imagine he was often an uninvited and surprising guest. The incarnation itself is God choosing movement, vulnerability, and exposure over stability and control. Christianity is a faith on the move. And that brings me to my second claim. God loves migrants. Again and again, Scripture highlights God's concern for the stranger. The command to welcome the foreigner is not grounded in generosity, but in identity. You shall love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. In other words, how we treat migrants is not a side issue. It is a measure of whether we remember who God is and who we are and where we come from. Jesus sharpens this even further. In Matthew 25, he says, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Or you didn't. There is no abstraction here. Christ identifies himself with displaced persons. To encounter the migrant is to encounter Christ himself. Let me repeat that. To encounter the migrant is to encounter Christ himself. Which means that hospitality is not politeness. It is part of our faith. And now we come to the third, unavoidable question. What does all of this say about what is happening in our country right now? We live in a moment where migrants are described as threats rather than neighbors, where families are separated as a matter of policy, where asylum is treated as a loophole instead of a lifeline, where fear is cultivated for political gain and cruelty is justified in the language of law and order. Let me be clear. Christians can disagree in good faith about economic policy, tax structures, or the size of our government. But some policies cross a theological line because they deny the dignity of human beings made in the image of God. policies that rely on dehumanization, policies that punish children to deter adults, policies that criminalize desperation. These are not just harsh, friends, they are unchristian. Not because the church belongs to one party or another, of course it doesn't, but because following Jesus places real limits on what we can bless, excuse, or normalize. You cannot claim allegiance to a displaced Christ while cheering systems that displace his people. You cannot worship the refugee Messiah on Sunday and then dismiss refugees as disposable on Monday. It's a theological contradiction. This panel today is about learning to see again, friends, about listening to voices, stories, and lived realities that can reorient our imaginations. It is about asking what faithfulness looks like when God is still on the move and God's people are still on the move. As a deacon, my calling is to stand at that threshold, to point to the places where the church meets the world and where Christ is already waiting for us there. Migration is one of those places, not at the margins of our faith, but near its very center. So I'm grateful for our forum today, and for David and for Will, who will help us think more deeply and truthfully and, God willing, more faithfully about what it means to follow Jesus in this moment in time. May we have ears to hear. May we have courage to respond. And may we remember that the God we worship is not finished moving yet.
What beautiful words, right? First of all, I'm David Hoover. I wanted to draw your attention to a table that has now become something outside of the men's restroom out in our gathering space. It will be a regular place where you can get information about ongoing justice issues. There will be a monthly flyer like this, a newsletter that Florian has been doing a wonderful job putting together based on the topic of the upcoming forum sponsored by the Faith in Action Committee. So just take a look for that. There'll be some highlights and things that you don't want to miss. And many of the things that I will be covering today are specifically mentioned in here. So if you wanted to know where you can follow up and do more, it will all be in there. So Florian's done a wonderful job of setting the stage. And of course, we're living in an age of ICE raids, famously in LA and Chicago and Charlotte. And today, I want to highlight some of the particulars that are happening in Richmond to make sure that you know what's going on. Much of the uh, I think Florian said that I was going to cover all the horrors. I can't begin in 15 minutes to cover all the horrors. I'm going to mention three related to the Richmond area, much of which generated in August and September and continue to grow, and something that we need to keep our eyes on. One is the acquisition logistics contract, building a concentration camp at Fort Bliss to the tune of $1.2 billion. That facility I'll talk more about. Also, the ICE raids that were happening at the Southwood apartments that have spread fear throughout the Latino community and the immigration community in general. And then the Richmond Jet Center outside of Richmond International Airport, that is a hub of deportations, many people being hauled away, cuffed, and sent to countries that don't that have no connection to them. They're being sent to countries that are not where they're not from. So, and also underlying all of this is is the sin of racism. Our immigration policy is founded, grounded, completely enmeshed in racism. When the Supreme Court says that it's okay for brown people to be rounded up when they just happen to speak Spanish or they happen to be brown, that is racism. when we have a policy led by Stephen Miller, who is an avowed racist, who thinks that white people are superior and that brown people are going to take over if we don't do something about getting rid of them. This is what we're living with, and we need to name it. Our top priority, at least that's the one that's first at St. Paul's, is naming and dismantling systemic racism. So this policy in its entire form is systemic racism, and I hope there's an invitation today and always to name this racism that is our immigration policy and to begin dismantling it as faithful Christians. To give more information about the three incidents that are happening the Richmond area. Um, Back in the summer, a $1.2 billion contract was awarded to Acquisition Logistics, based in Henrico County, to build an ICE detention center at Fort Bliss, Texas. The CEO is Kenneth Wagner. He lives in Henrico County, and they have created tent cities where human rights organizations have difficulty getting in. The reports are that people are being beaten, denied food, denied medical care, and this has been in operation since August. It is difficult to figure out what's going on in there. There's very little information about the kinds of care that people are getting. And this company has never previously built any facility like this on this scale, reportedly getting a 10% profit from the contract. So that is just, again, to highlight that that is going on. Also, last um, end of the summer, beginning of fall, in Richmond, there have been multiple ICE raids at the Southwood apartment complex. Residents were stopped on the way to work. Their cars were broken into, windshields were broken. There were warrantless searches. People were hauled away. Children were in the back seat as ICE agents were hauling people away. The arrests have been often carried out by masked agents, sometimes without warrants or charges. And this, while these kinds of raids have not been pervasive in the Richmond area, this particular series of raids led to extreme fear in the Latino community in Richmond, where people are afraid to go to work, they're afraid to go to church, they're afraid to allow their children to go to school. So it is just permeated particularly in this case, the Latino community in huge fear about leaving their houses. Human Rights First has identified Richmond Jet Center as a private airport near Richmond International Airport as a major hub of ICE deportation flights. Hundreds of flights have been reported. Handcuffed and shackled individuals are primarily sent to Louisiana to the detention center there. Some have been shipped in buses and flown to uh, private planes to the Farmville Detention Center, and other people in this area are being detained in the Farmville Detention Center. Some flights are leaving this airport near the major airport to El Salvador and other flights to other countries. These flights operate under special security status with limited public transparency, and according to available data, only a small percentage of those detained by ICE are violent criminals. The Varina district is kind of in that area. So Supervisor Tyrone Nelson is a person who has publicly stated that he's deeply disturbed by what he's hearing and pledged to investigate further. So that is an opportunity that we might want to do something about. In all of these cases, at the heart of it is racist, unjust policies towards the immigrant that our faith tells us to love and welcome and include. Hearing this news makes us feel sick, despondent, angry, and what can we do? So I mostly wanted to give you some information about some of the things that are going on, but also ways that you can monitor what's going on. I have to say that the Henrico Citizen has been amazing when it comes to particularly covering the airport situation and Dina Weinstein is the main reporter at the Henrico Citizen who has been following this and keeping up with this. So that's one way that we can track what's going on there. Also, there are several local organizations that are monitoring and responding to these developments. I've been very impressed with RVA Indivisible Immigration Action Subcommittee. They have regular Zoom meetings. They monitor what's going on at the Chesterfield Courthouse. They will have demonstrations at some sites. And all of us are trying to figure out what to do. Where do we focus our attention? Because it's such a moving target. And will explain just in the past 3 weeks how much the policies have changed, particularly in the Afghan community. So it's a moving target, but I've been very impressed, particularly, and you don't have to go to a bunch of indivisible meetings if you don't want to. You can just be involved in the subcommittee on immigration if that is what moves your heart. Another group that is doing a lot of work, particularly in the courthouses, hospitals, work sites where people are being rounded up, oftentimes without warrants, oftentimes citizens are being rounded up in the move. RVA Defensa is a group to pay attention to. And then, of course, we're going to hear a lot about Reestablish Richmond from our next speaker. When we walk with Jesus, we welcome the stranger. We defend the vulnerable and we bear witness to the truth. We are truth tellers. And as St. Paul's people, we are committed to naming and dismantling systemic racism. So that is my prayer that today will reinvigorate that particular priority for us as we learn more and more about how to welcome the stranger. So thank you. And if you could introduce Will, you'd do a better job of it.
And now we have our guest, Will Combia, who's with Reestablish Richmond, and I will let him tell you all the good things that Reestablish Richmond does. So give Will a big hand of welcome.
Well, good morning, y'all. Thank you so much for having me this morning. My name is Will. I am the Outreach and Volunteer Engagement Manager at Reestablish Richmond. You've unknowingly given an almost Baptist minister a microphone. So y'all will let anyone through the door here at St. Paul's, but we appreciate. Thank you so much for having us this morning and for giving us the platform to share about our work and how to get involved in our work as well. Is this a clicker that works? I can just tune it. That's fine. I can use the arrows. That's all right. So, Reestablish Richmond was actually founded originally out of a Baptist church, out of Tabernacle Baptist Church, over a decade ago. We have since morphed and grown into a non-religious 501c3 nonprofit, but our roots are in ministry at a local church. At that point, we were working with a lot of Burmese families that were not getting access to what they should have as resettled refugees in the greater Richmond area. And so we were founded to fill gaps back then, and we have continued to fill gaps within the greater refugee resettlement landscape as well as immigration landscape over the past decade plus. Our mission is to help newcomers in our community, both refugees and new immigrants, to establish roots, to build community, and to become self-sufficient. And we primarily do that through access to resourcing, to signposting and saying there are good resources that exist in the community, and if there are barriers to those resources, how can we think creatively and think in conjunction with newcomer communities about accessing those resources? So we are very much not into reinventing the wheel. We love to partner with folks in the community. We do a lot of partnership with faith communities. We do a lot of partnership with government agencies. We do good partnership with resettlement agencies themselves, like the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, Commonwealth Catholic Charities, to try and strengthen this kind of network of welcome and resourcing for newcomers. Where we see that there is a gap, we try and fill in with new programming or figuring out what are those barriers to access and trying trying to help folks overcome them themselves. Our goal is to help folks become self-sufficient. We do not want to kind of continue unhealthy helping relationships where folks are completely dependent on us for everything, but try to give the tools that folks can move on in their own goals in their own lives. Um, there, there will be some explanation in this presentation of what was, and then there will be a lot of, okay, now that we're in our current moment, what do we do now? So because of our history that we were founded kind of within the refugee resettlement landscape, a lot of our clients that we are still working with are coming through and have come through, I guess I should say, the refugee resettlement process. So we've worked with a lot of Afghan folks in the last few years, and 60 to 70% of our clients the past few years have been Afghans. A lot of those are folks with SIV status, special immigrant visa status, those that worked or supported the US military or other US institutions in Afghanistan. But we also work with clients from all over the world. So we have a lot of Sudanese folks that we've worked with, folks from Central and Latin America, Southeast Asia, other parts of the Middle East and Central and East Africa and West Africa. We've got folks from all over. Our qualifications is that you're a newcomer in need of support. And we did intentionally change our mission a few years ago to be a little bit more broad to newcomers of all persuasions, so not just refugees or those with some sort of refugee or asylum status, but anyone who is a newcomer. That being said, relatively few of the clients we're working with at the moment are kind of from a Latino or kind of other immigrant background, and that's because there is quite a robust network of Spanish language and other kind of Latino support within the community. We do a lot of partnership with the Sacred Heart Center on the south side, as well as the City of Richmond's Office of Immigrant and Refugee Engagement. So we have not been kind of so much down in the weeds in terms of immigration status. We do not do any direct immigration support. That's not our lane, and we know enough to stay out of that lane because it is you want experts and you want folks with expertise to be operating there. And so we do a lot of referrals to other organizations that work within that. Prior to a few weeks ago, our messaging had been, at the moment we were working with a lot of Afghan clients, Afghan folks, a lot of them with SIV status are in a pretty secure status, and at that time there was not a whole lot of concerns for Afghans in the community, other than the normal concerns that I'll talk about soon. Of course, that has changed a lot in the past few weeks. I think it was Thanksgiving week that there was a National Guard member that was killed by an Afghan national in DC, and that has completely changed the entire what that means for Afghan folks. So we're still going to see what that looks like, and a lot is coming through there. On the left-hand side of the screen, right-hand side of the screen, you can see resettlement numbers within Richmond. So the light green is within Richmond, the darker green is across Virginia and Richmond area, I should say. So you can see that comes and goes based off of presidential administration. The refugee cap is something that is set by the president, and so you can see that we had a lot of folks coming in. There were a lot of Afghans that came in during Biden administration. We had a huge ramp up of the system, and of course that entire program is completely shut, except for white South Afrikaners. Which at this moment. I do believe that there have been some that have come to the greater Richmond area. The resettlement agencies, so like IRC and CCC, it is their federal mandate to work with those folks if they request services. We have not yet had to decide what we do if someone comes and requests services from us. We're not expecting anyone to need services from us, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So yeah, we are deeply troubled by the closing of the U.S. refugee program. I am happy to go in later if you have any questions in terms of the amount of vetting that folks have to go through in order to be resettled here in the U.S. And it's less than 1% of folks that apply for asylum to come to the U.S. as a refugee actually go through that, which means it is the most vulnerable people who are making it here. So We are a little bit further down the pipeline in terms of who we are working with, and so even prior to January 20th of this year, there were a lot of folks who already were made it into the country, and so we are not anticipating the demands of our services and requests for referrals to go down anytime soon. The past 2 years, this year included, we had to shut down or close our referral form just because we had too much demand and we needed to get through the kind of backlog before the new year. So we're not currently taking referrals for new clients, but we'll reopen sometime in the new year. And that was the case last year as well. And at this point, we're not seeing any decrease of demand. And in fact, we'll probably only see an increase of demand as gaps widen and we try to fill those different gaps. So there's still much work to do, and we're grateful to be here and be around for this moment. We're not particularly happy that there are new things that we have to respond to, but we are grateful that we are positioned well to be able to fill in the gaps at this time. So the normal challenges, again, in normal times, these are the core challenges that newcomers are facing in the community. A lot of these things you probably are going to be familiar with as well, but when you kind of see them on the ground, they become a little bit more real. Language access and cultural barriers. So a lot of folks, particularly if we think about Afghans, culturally, men will have a lot higher access to education and to employment opportunities. And so when folks come here to the greater Richmond area, the men are better equipped to be able to work outside the home and to provide for the home for themselves. But whereas in Afghanistan or a lot of other places where clients were coming from, one income was enough for folks to be able to support themselves. Here, it is almost impossible, particularly for the jobs that most folks are getting to begin with, to only live on a single income, even with different access to benefits. When benefits were available to folks, and that those metrics keep changing as well for benefit access. So it is imperative that women also work outside the home or have some sort of second stream of income. For many women who are coming, they have not had any access to formal education or to formal job markets, and so all of the things that come with even just working the most basic job, there are a lot of hurdles to get there. So we try and program based off of language access and helping folks get at least the basic language services that they need to be able to work and to work through cultural barriers as well. Employment access, I'm also kind of skipping to talk about, and education access. This is a huge barrier, particularly for women, but for a lot of men as well. A lot of SIV holders who worked with the U.S. military were contractors, right? So they might have worked in construction, or they might have worked in a pretty specialty area or field. And unless you have the right certification and qualification to do that here, it's not going to be as easily accessed. And so you have to go jump through a whole lot of hoops in order to come back to the same career that you had before. And it's never even a guarantee that you are able to access and be in the same career that you were before. Transportation is a huge issue. I assume that everyone drove here today. Is that correct? In your own car? And probably you might have multiple cars per household. That is not the case for many folks when they first come here. A lot of folks will have one car per household, but when you have needing a second income, and you also have to take kids different places as well, having that second vehicle or a vehicle is so important. And for many women in particular, they have never had to really spend much time in a car. Life is very localized for many folks, particularly in Afghanistan, and you did not need to get into a car. You could live your life completely without a car. Now, it's not only the expectation that you need one to get places, but you also have to drive it. And that it can be extremely intimidating when you are not familiar with cultural understandings of the laws, and also the cultural understandings of, well, yeah, the speed limit's the speed limit, but there's some wiggle room, but understanding that wiggle room is a very kind of soft cultural piece. So one of our biggest areas is helping folks get their driver's license. And it's a really incredible piece to watch. I don't know if you all remember getting your driver's license or learner's permit, the freedom that comes with that, right? And for many of these, particularly for these women, they're not spending a whole lot of time outside the home. And so it can be very intimidating and scary for many of them, but it's also very exciting to be able to access the world in a much different way. So helping folks get their driver's license is one of the coolest things that we do, and we have a really great partnership with the local kind of localities and have become a bit of an expert on both language access and helping folks get their driver's license. And then connections. Lack of connections is another thing. If you have two young kids you're looking after, you can't leave the house, you don't have a car, you don't have a job, you're pretty isolated into where you're living. You might live in an apartment complex where you might know some of your neighbors, but a lot of folks aren't. And so lack of connections and access to connectivity is another huge issue that people face. So, and then, yeah, more of the current context of what this looks like. So yeah, there have been pretty significant cuts to resettlement agencies. CCC, the Commonwealth Catholic Charities, have reduced much of their resettlement programming for newcomers. The IRC, because there was so much funding that was pumped in during the Biden administration, they are able to weather this better than Trump won. Which is great. So they are still taking walk-ins. They are still able to access a good amount of their service, but they have reduced or laid off some of their resettlement staff and some of the work that they're doing. Obviously, fear and anxiety around status and status review is super high for Afghan folks, particularly. Everything in the past few weeks, there is a lot of uncertainty, and there's also a lot of anger. People who are SIV holders worked for the U.S. military and were better vetted, were so thoroughly vetted in their families and what they did. They effectively, many of them had the same level clearance as a CIA agent to work for the federal government, right? And so now for them, and right, they uprooted their family. There's so many broken promises. It's a string of broken promises, but at least they were able to come here, right? And to be here and to be settled and have a secure status that they can work towards citizenship and towards stability for their family for the first time, for many of them, their entire lives or for decades. So now that there's all of this talk of reviewing statuses for SIV holders and for anyone who was given refugee or asylum status during the Biden administration, there's a lot of, I cannot believe this, and there's a lot of anger as well. Which is unfortunate and also so counterproductive. That of course the violence that happened was abhorrent, but the solution to that violence is not this, right? And if anything, this is only going to fuel more resentment among folks that have been let in, which is, probably the point in terms of probably inciting more violence that incites further. Anyways, we're just in a race to the bottom here. So we are doing our best right now just to kind of mentally support our Afghan neighbors. At the moment, there's a lot of talk, and there has not necessarily been a lot of concrete, what is this going to look like from a policy level in status review? And we have not had any folks come to us and say, hey, I've got a court date or I've got this to come and review all of my status and my papers and different things like that. So we'll see what happens. Of course, family reunification and program cuts. There's a lot of benefits that folks don't have access to anymore, or so much confusion. Was already a confusing system of if you qualify for SNAP, if you qualify for Medicaid, and now it's so much more confusing. They've gone back and forth and said, actually, on this date you're going to lose that, or if you have this status, or you were here on that date, if you looked the wrong way at the street, and suddenly you don't have access to these different benefits, and you're all also navigating that in not your native language and in a culture that doesn't make sense to you. So navigating the benefits process is very confusing for folks as well. Many folks, despite all of the issues here, are most worried about their family back home in Afghanistan or in diaspora. There are as many Afghans that are here in Richmond, which is a few thousand. There are tens of thousands in diaspora across the world, a lot in Pakistan, a lot in Iran, a lot across Europe, South America, and they're worried about their families, and they were also promised that they can be reunited with their families here in the US. And that has been greatly reduced in terms of travel bans and all status review and everything like that. And so people are worried about their family members, many of them elderly family members, many of them sick, who are in limbo and are going to stay in limbo. And so we are doing our best to mentally support folks within that. And then, of course, economic impact. It's a bad job market right now. We had a pretty decent partnership with one of the Amazon distribution centers, and recently found out that some of the clients that we had worked with to get jobs at that distribution center, that they've been replaced by a robot. We had one client that our employment navigation coach was working with, that he was literally building the robot that was going to replace his job. And which is so dystopian and so strange. And so it's coming from multiple different angles in terms of kind of the tech advances and all different things. So the job market is very tough for folks, and of course there's a lot of economic stress that comes from that. And then there's something else that I was going to say, but that is probably enough, and if I remember it, we will see. So how are we trying to support within this? We are broken up into 3 different teams. We have our operations team, which does a lot of our fundraising and making sure that we can continue to offer the services that we have. We have our outreach team. Increasingly, we are doing more community education, things like this, of helping educate and help the community understand what are the realities of newcomers, who are our neighbors, and what are they facing right now. As well as our volunteer engagement team, and we do have a number of volunteer opportunities that I can tell you more about in just a second. And then the bulk of our work is on our client engagement side. We do 2 different branches. We do one-to-one direct support, and then we do group programming. So in our one-to-one support, we've got a few different programs that we run. We do run our own English classes. It's one of the few areas that we replicate, because there are a lot of English classes in the community. There will never be enough English classes, though, to fill the need. The other difference is that we provide for all clients that request it, transportation and childcare. It is lovely if there is a church that is a mile down the road in Western Henrico from where the apartment complex where you live. However, there are no sidewalks to get there. I have a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old, and no one, the church is not offering childcare. It's at night when my other kids are home, and all of these different things. And so we offer programming during the day. We provide transportation to those who need it, and we provide childcare to do it. We can only do that with volunteers, though. So that is one of our major areas that we need volunteer support on. We have a sewing class that has turned into kind of it's a economic empowerment program, but also kind of a community building program for Afghan women. A couple of emotional support groups, and we do have a conversation cafe that we do in partnership with Third Church during their youth tutoring program. And then one-to-one support, our 3 biggest areas. We do have an English tutoring program, one-to-one, working 1 hour a week. So if you're interested in helping someone learn English and work towards their language goals, we have that program. We have employment navigation, a coach on staff, as well as we are increasingly looking to volunteers to help work with folks for 6 weeks to 2 months to be able to work towards basic employment navigation, helping folks write their first resume, help them understand what are you supposed to do when you walk into a job interview, different things like that. And then our transportation independence, of helping folks get their learner's permit, get their driver's license. On a limited basis, we do some car donations as well. We're really excited. We just secured a partnership with Henrico County to get some of their rotating off of their fleet to be able to donate to clients. We're really excited about that. And just to say, we just had one of our graduations from our English class this past week, and there were 12 women in the class, all Afghan women. Half of them had never gone to school. Half of them had never learned any alphabet, even in the Arabic script. And they're learning completely from scratch. And they got up and they were so excited to share their mini presentations. They made their own PowerPoint slide in Google Slides. And they got up and they just shared basic things about their family, right? My name is this. I am from Afghanistan. This is my daughter. She is 8 years old. But those basic words, to give them the tools to be able to communicate their stories, their families, who they are in this space, it was so incredibly beautiful. I wish you all could have been there and also enjoyed the food, because they're learning English, but they also are amazing cooks, and we had lovely food as well. It is really difficult work. And I have to say, I'm not doing a lot of direct client work, but our client engagement team is in the trenches every day. And they're getting calls 24/7 from folks saying, I need this. What am I supposed to do with this? My family needs this. Can you help me with X, Y, and Z? And as a person of faith myself, I struggle so much on the national level when the name of Christ is used to exclude and to justify everything that's going on right now. And so I cannot say enough words of how grateful I am and how we are as a team for churches like St. Paul's, for the work that you are doing, for standing up, for putting your heads above the line, into the line of fire to say this is not right and this is not what Christ would do. So thank you for that work. I welcome you if you want to get involved in our work. There's a few different key areas to get involved. If you are able to volunteer, we are always in need of daytime drivers to help get to and from our classes. The next round will be starting up in the fall. A lot of that is happening in Western Henrico, which is where a lot of our clients are living right now. If you want to do one-to-one as a tutoring or as an employment navigation coach, there's a lot of different ways to get involved. You can see the full list of ways to get involved on our website. Donate. We are in the middle of our end of year campaign. I believe we're close to 70,000 of our 100,000 goal for the end of year to be able to sustain our work into the next year. If you're able to give, we greatly appreciate that. And it is so important to be able to provide the vital resources that we do provide. And then spread the word. I really encourage you, if you're not able to volunteer or give, look at our website and just become familiar with the work that we do, as well as there's a list of client resources on that website. So as you're out in the community, you find someone who might need an English class or might need access to some resource. We have that really long curated list of resources in the community that could be a lifesaver for someone. So go to our website, see the different resources that are around. We have partners in immigration, in food, in security, in English classes, in food and clothing, and medical and healthcare. So be familiar with some of the ways that you can support folks. And if you do know someone that might need our services, I do have some client referral cards, and we will open up that referral form sometime in the new year. Yeah, I think that is it. We started late, so I don't know where I am in the time, but I'm happy to take questions. But thank you all so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Does anyone have a question?
Thank you for your presentation. It's most enlightening. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the religious background of the refugees that you work with, and how, if they're not Christian, how are how, practicing their faith, are they able to do that here safely?
Yeah, so the majority of our clients are from a Muslim background, and pretty much most of them are connected to a local mosque or Islamic center of some kind. We have not heard, well, no out of the ordinary Islamophobia, which is terrible. But that, clients will, in their everyday lives, will deal with, comments about hijabs or their kids' names or different things like that, kind of microaggressions. But in the past year, at least, we have not seen any significant incidents of people being targeted because of their faith or not being able to express their faith. But we do work closely with the Islamic Center of Virginia and other kind of local mosques and Muslim organizations to try and, because that is, for as much all of the Christian nationalistic rhetoric, all of this kind of the soft Islamophobia that's so rampant is really horrific, and the undertones of that, overtones and undertones, are really bad. So at the moment, we're not seeing any significant kind of. Most folks are able to express themselves quite openly and freely, and we're grateful for that. Yeah.
Coming.
There's a very large SIV community in Northern Virginia.
Yep.
And do you collaborate or partner with them at all?
Not so much. We are fairly localized and work just in the greater Richmond area, and our capacities have been such that, we're mostly just doing work here and kind of partnering locally. We do know a lot of folks. There's a lot of folks that move back and forth between Nova and Richmond, and so we know former clients and families that have gone, and so we've done some very indirect kind of partnership of like, oh, we knew this person that went up there, and we know of some organizations that we sometimes refer folks to, but we. At the moment, it's a dream that someday maybe a statewide better network could exist as kind of a hub, but we don't have the capacity to do that right now. So there's enough fish to fry here in Richmond.
Question. Chris, I'm on my way. Just want to make sure the recording captures everything. I know you're
Getting
working me out. That's good.
getting your steps in for the day.
So at some point, Richmond may become a more direct ICE target like Chicago or other cities. Is there a way to prepare for that?
Yeah, it's so inconsistent and hard to know what's going to happen, and also with how blue we've turned and what's going to happen after January, how much retribution and kind of punishment we'll get for various policies. We're not sure. So, in terms of preparation, I think similar things, I think probably that you all have done in terms of know your rights, understanding red cards, different things for helping folks understand what rights they do have access to. We are not kind of as much in the trenches on ICE Watch, just because it has not affected directly a lot of our clients so far, and we are going to be asking those questions as well. If Afghans begin to be targeted kind of in mass, what does that mean, or others of a similar status? So we will continue to share resources as we have them, but at the moment we're kind of also asking those same questions of how can we best prepare.
If I can, that's working now. If I can address that, the St. Paul's clergy staff have been talking about this issue. What do we do? How do we prepare? There's a document that comes from a national organization on the corner of Will's table that talks about what to do. St. Paul's is probably most vulnerable on Thursday mornings for a potential kind of ICE raid. There have been conversations about what to do, and part of it has to do with having private spaces that are designated, maybe some of the rooms off to the left out here that guests could be taken to if ICE people show up, because they cannot go into private spaces legally and they need to have warrants, and there are all sorts of steps. And one of the things I discovered through the indivisible refugee group is that Mennonites locally are doing trainings on what to do about ICE, and that's where I've discovered them, through that RVA Indivisible subcommittee. So there are steps that are being led, and Florian and Gwen, I believe, are taking the lead locally for us to be educated in what to say and what to do. And there are cards that have been distributed among our Emmaus guests on what to say if somebody comes along. And Gwen, we're saying what our local response is. So I wish you had been here to see if I was accurate, but I think I think I was. Okay.
That was quite accurate. And I know we're over time, so unless we have one more two more questions. Well, this is so good. Come on.
I'm also
This is
happy to
good.
stay after for
This is
individual
in
questions.
context to what you're saying. One of the groups that I'm involved with has a woman who was her neighborhood she grew up in Chicago has been assaulted by ICE repeatedly for weeks. And one of the things that has been effective there is a whistle. And you probably heard about this. Well, this group I'm talking about, we're trying to put these together. They're very simple. It's a whistle, and it's instructions on how to stay safe if you are encountering ICE in your neighborhood. So I just want to put everybody, we're getting this out, and it's going to be out there throughout. We're going to try to do it throughout Richmond. However, one of the things we're trying to do is, does this really? The question is this something that the community can use themselves to keep themselves safe? So that's one of the things that we're going through now. So I'll give you an example for myself. We live in Belmont, have an old house, needs repairs. So what'd I say? Oh, Bellevue. This is I had two repair crews come through our house last year, and they all spoke Spanish the whole entire time. So you may have people come in your house, you may have connection with people you work with or you know of. This is an opportunity to ask them, would this be something that they would find helpful? Would this be something they could use in their community, and they cost nothing to distribute? And you've probably seen videos of this being done in Chicago, with whistles being blown in Chicago, Los Angeles, other places. So um, I'll be getting this around to people if you want them, and we're kind of working on this as we're going along.
Thanks, Greg. You get the last word, Simon.
Whoop.
Or, you get the next to last. Okay, we're good.
I volunteer with Reestablish and with Will, and I want to tell you it has been one of the most incredibly rewarding experiences I have ever gone through. I'm working with a Muslim family, and they've been very open, feel very safe with me in learning their English, but safe in explaining their own faith, which has been fascinating. And I can't recommend this organization more. It's been absolutely terrific. And I will keep going helping people like that because it's been so good.
Thank you, Sign. I paid her to say that. Don't worry. I'll get you later.
May I ask what is the flavor of the support amongst the various legislative groups that there are, um, the legislative branches that are here in Richmond? For example, is the state supportive of what you're doing? Is the city supportive? Is the federal government? I think I know the answer to that.
Yeah, we most of our partnerships are quite local. So we have good partnerships with Henrico County and the Henrico kind of their board of folks. The city of Richmond, we have some pretty good partnership with, and we do a big event with the city of Richmond every year, the Multicultural Festival, the end of June. And they actually are partnering with us too. We have our Refugee and Immigrant Volunteer Summit at the end of February as well. So the city of Richmond has been very on board. Henrico County has been very on board. Not as much with Chesterfield, and Hanover is Hanover. We do have some relationships with state representatives. Try to we try to stay out of politics as much as possible. Just as a 501c3, we try to be very careful in terms of kind of who we affiliate ourselves with. But we have had support directly from the Lieutenant Governor elect Hashmi. So we have good relationships with her. But it's a mix. But at the moment, no, not a lot of federal relationships. Yeah.
How about with the police?
We do not have a whole lot of direct relationship with the police, and each of the different kind of precincts has their own soft and hard rules when it comes to immigration and different things. So I think the City of Richmond Police are not directly working with ICE. Henrico County is kind of somewhere in the middle, but leaning towards not. Chesterfield is, I think Hanover is as well. But we have not been directly involved with a lot of police activity. So. Or police folks. But yes, thank you all so much. For more information, please take the flyer on your table, and I'm happy to answer questions at the table as well.
Thank you, Will. So thank you, Will, so much. A little teaser related to that question, Roger, is that the Faith in Action Committee will be monitoring bills that are relevant. So there are bills about agents needing to be unmasked, to wear badges, those kinds of things. We'll be monitoring that. So you'll be getting information from Faith in Action in January as the legislature unfolds. And I want to tell one story. There was a woman I knew who was related to Catholic Charities, and a woman, one of their clients needed some diapers for their baby and some formula. And this woman just showed up, said, "Here, let me bring you some formula and diapers." And the Latina who answered the door was frightened, terrified, but needed this for her baby. And my friend Ann went and delivered it. And just that one moment was, oh, here is a safe white lady who's coming in and is safe and to deal with. And an ongoing relationship has developed, like Sion is talking about. And when we talk about justice, we talk about proximity, and Brian Stevens talks about proximity and our white privilege, and so many things economically keep us from the people that we want to help. And just volunteering in any kind of organization like this helps us with proximity so that we actually see the lives and see the impact that people have, that we're having. So let us close in prayer. Loving and faithful God, you led your people through deserts and across seas, and in Jesus you became a migrant among us. We lift before you all who journey in search of safety, those fleeing violence, hunger, and fear, those separated from loved ones, detained or turned away. Guard them on the roads they travel. Grant courage to the weary and hope to the faithful. Soften our hearts, sharpen our conscience, and make your church, St. Paul's Church, a place of refuge, welcome, and truth. May we recognize your face in every stranger and walk in your way of justice, mercy, and peace through Christ, our companion on this way. Amen.